Howdy, folks. Welcome to the SoundAppraiser podcast. This is Cary Nightingale. With me, as always, is Kevin Niebrick. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm just happy as hell to be here.
That's great to hear. So tonight we've got something a little bit different. We had picked a couple of songs that we were going to give TuneScores to and then present them to you in the usual manner. But frankly, what we picked, both the topic and the songs, it was bullshit. We decided to talk about songs with great guitar solos, great guitar lead work. And we picked a few songs that I didn't like the ones that Kevin picked. Kevin didn't like the one that I picked. So we ended up at a little bit of a stalemate, and we're going to do something a little bit different. Let's talk about, Kev, if you're okay with it, let's talk about just guitar solos in general. What makes a great guitar solo, and what separates I don't know if we can still use this expression in 2020, but what separates the men from the boys when it comes to guitar solos?
Cary is, I like to write songs. You know that. I like to play instruments. I'm not particularly great. I'm not a musician. I wouldn't consider myself one. But I would consider myself a songwriter. I like to write songs. I think I'm starting to get the hang of it. I really enjoy what I'm doing. You may dislike this, but as far as I'm concerned, uh, when you write a solo, you're kind of just filling a slot, an empty slot in the song that needs to be filled.
That is, I guess that's a hot take. So you don't care about guitar solos, despite the fact that you made me listen to all 46 minutes of November Rain about 4 times so that I could give it a tune score that we're not even going to present. And then Welcome Home by Coheed and Cambria that I absolutely despised. You recommended those as having excellent guitar solos, when in fact, you don't care. You think they're just there to fill time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. Well, that is a hot take. To say that a guitar solo doesn't matter, it's just there to fill space and time. I think a well-crafted or even well-improvised guitar solo can do more in the context of a song than just fill space. So you're right. When we're writing songs and, you've got your chord progression, you got your 4 chords that play in verse 1 and then they repeat for verse 2. And then if you're not a complete lazy asshole, you write a couple of different chords for your chorus, and then maybe some more for a bridge. There is a structure to the song, and it's usually just a repeated verse section that ends up with the guitar solo in it. Well, then why even leave that space in there? Why give the singer a break? I look at it this way. A guitar solo, the lead guitar player is the backup front man. The singer's the front man. The singer needs to take a little bit of a break between chorus 1 and chorus 2 or whatever. So says, hey, I'm on break. I'm taking 5. Slash, get in there. You got it, boss. And Slash goes in and smokes a guitar solo and plays a cigarette. And you think he's just filling time.
I think they're both taking a smoke break is what's happening. All right, prove me wrong. So here's the thing. I agree that there can be bad guitar solos. I know this because I've written quite a few. I know that there's things that you can do wrong. But I think as long as you fill that space and you make it interesting and you make it fit the mood of the piece, and you can do whatever you want. I mean, largely solos are typically improvisational. They don't require structure. You don't have to write it out. I know that some people do. I do myself because I am not an improvisationalist. So I write and I rehearse and I get the thing down until I get it down as perfect as I can get it. And then that's the solo. And that's usually what I go with. There's things that I do like about solos. I think that can accentuate the mood of the piece. I think that they can maybe even take it in a new direction depending on the solo that you play, what you're doing. I know that we had several examples that we listened to. One of those was Leonard Skinner. Was it Freebird, where it kind of starts real slow? It's legato and then ups the tempo all the way until they're getting real fast there at the end. So it can you can do a lot of interesting things with a solo. My point is that I as far as structure goes, I think it's just filling a slot. It's just taking a place there and doing something to change up the song, break it up a little bit, make it sound more interesting. I think there's a lot of ways to do that, and only a few ways that you can really do it poorly and very poorly.
So, what are some of the ways that you think it could be done poorly for those of us who want to avoid that?
Well, you want to be in key or next to it, right? You want it to sound good melodically with the piece, harmonically with the piece.
You
Counterpoint.
don't want to be next to the key. You want to be either in key or very far away from it.
Oh, okay.
Because if you're right next to
That's
it,
what I'm doing wrong.
if the piece is in E major and you're playing an E flat major, you're a half step away. That is going to sound like utter dog shit.
Okay,
Don't do that, folks.
maybe that's what I've been doing wrong this whole time.
Well, you always play right in between E and E flat because your guitar is so far out of tune.
No, I like it that way. I did that on purpose.
It's probably perfectly in tune with my voice. I should have you accompany play the guitar for me.
Well, so you can make it sound poor if you're if you're close to the key. If you're playing in the wrong key, you're going to sound different. It's going to sound bad. So you should
Mhm.
make it whatever you're doing, make it sound melodically and harmonically appropriate to the piece. You can either stick to the rhythm of the piece, or you could go way outside the rhythm. Those are two boring things. So the first one is boring. If you're playing, eighth
Like
note,
Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Smells Like Teen Spirit is very much, again, we listen to it very much just kind of the melody. Again, the vocal melody just played on the guitar.
It's
Um,
a nice melody,
it sounds good.
but not a terribly interesting solo because that's all it is. If he had branched off from that in the second half of the solo, it would have made it, in my opinion, infinitely more interesting.
Yeah. And then if you're stuck in the, maybe not the rhythm is the wrong word, but if you're stuck to the beat and you're playing that solo and you're rigid, it's going to sound like a robot's playing it. It's going to be very boring and uninteresting. But if you go way off tempo and start doing other random shit that the band's not catching up with, that's also clearly wrong. Like, so you've got to find a sweet spot where you're kind of riding the wave.
Like I used to do when you and I would jam together and you were playing the drums and I was trying to play guitar over it.
No, that was me because I can't keep a beat to save my life.
One, one of us was dragging and the other one was leading. I think that's the phrase. Not quite my tempo either way.
Nobody was on time.
Luckily, we've gotten a lot better as masters of our craft, or at least apprentices of the craft in recent years. So I would say that a big sin of guitar solos is misusing techniques. And when I say that, there are a lot of different techniques that you can use when you're playing single notes on a guitar. You got your hammer-ons, you got your hammer-offs. You can play low on the neck, high on the neck, on the thinner strings, on the thicker strings, uh, slides, staccatos, sweep picking. You can shred, you can play really slowly. So the
You can bend them.
bending is another thing. There's so many different techniques. Which guitar pedals are you using too? Uh, you know, I've got a pedal board with compressor, distortion, fuzz, uh, delay, tremolo, reverb, more delay, more reverb, flanger, and a volume pedal, which gives, if I turn all those on,
The
aside
power
from,
goes out.
aside from probably creating an electrical fire in my house, it's gonna make a really bad sound. It's gonna be unclear. It's gonna be too heavily processed. This is why I don't really care for solos by some guys like the Edge from U2. That relies maybe a little bit too much on the guitar effects and not enough on melodicity, which may or may not be an actual word. I like it. It sounds better to my ear than melodicness. Or Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, I think, is another one that maybe overuses the wah pedal and some of the other effects. But what I mean when I say the sin of misusing techniques, it's either using too few or too many of those techniques and effects in a single solo. It's appropriate to give it some variation, but not all of that variation, and definitely not none of it.
I would say that you can. The opposite is true too. As far as you were talking about effects pedals, as far as like using too many effects, making the guitar sound completely, garbage,
Unguitar like.
unguitar like. I would argue with you on that a little bit. I think that it's nice. One of the things I dislike is when your guitar part um, earlier in the song and the guitar hasn't changed at all, so it sounds the exact same. I mean, that would be a thing I would dislike also. I think that would be inappropriate. I think throwing an effect on there changes up the sound of the guitar, separates it from the earlier part of the piece, and I think that is important.
That was something that I thought that I noticed one time when I listened to Kid Charlemagne. I don't think I noticed it before the one time or after the one time, but I remember I made note of it when I was going to give it a tune score. And that was the first guitar solo sounded a little bit cleaner than the second guitar solo. And I thought that was really fitting if it really happened, because the second guitar solo comes right after the lyrics that are talking about how not only has his business failed, but he's now in potential danger. Be careful what you carry. The man is wise. You're an outlaw in their eyes, that kind of thing. And I thought that was really appropriate for the overall concept of the song, to make that solo a little bit dirtier now that the main character's situation has changed and worsened, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a different feel. It's a different emotion you're trying to get people to jump into. There is a change at that point, and that's going to happen. I think that's when you're maybe location of solos. Maybe that's another thing you can do wrong. Maybe you can have too many. Maybe you can put them, spot them in throughout the piece. Um, but after a while, it's repetitive. It's boring.
So when you think about some of the songs that you've written, and particularly the ones on guitar and that have guitar solos, think about the structure. Where do you usually put your guitar solos?
Anywhere I can't think of lyrics to put in. No, usually I put them tail end, end of the second act, going into the third. Usually
It's a sort of bridge material.
bridge material mostly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think about some of my songs. For me, it's almost the reverse. I put lyrics in when I can't think of a guitar solo to play. Think about my old, Scorpio that's out there. Uh, that just has like 3 verses, and they're super quick, and I practically rap them. Uh, but the song is pretty much all guitar solos, and they're not even really solos in the traditional sense, but more melodic lead guitar playing. Or the old Memory Like the Pacific that had 2 very short verses and a pretty short bridge, and the song was 7 minutes of 3, maybe 4 guitars just wailing away at each other for the duration. So yeah, my
I
my
think
take is usually a little bit different.
I think it's contextual too. Again, it just depends on the song that you're trying to craft and what really benefits the piece. You know, does this benefit the piece or is it taking away? Is it drawing your attention elsewhere? Um, uh, and that's a thing too. You know, it's kind of, I like to think of it as like taking a walk away from the song for a minute. You know, we were here, let's go meander over here for a little bit and then come back and then jump right back in. I think that's another thing you can screw up, the lead in back to the song. If you got to be on key, you've got to be on point, and you got to hit it at the right time. I mean, that's pretty much it. But again, that's like okay, it does this, and then I do that. Done. That's as far as I think about writing solos. That's as much effort as I put into it, and it shows. I'll bet.
I'm actually a pretty big fan of some of your solos. Cut, color, clarity. I like your lead work on that. I know you hate it, and the guitar was not in tune for that one. Well, I think there are some songs that are made better by good guitar solos. I would say that the David Gilmour guitar solos in Money, the Pink Floyd Money, I would say that's a guitar solo that adds inches to Pink Floyd's dick. I'm sure there are some cases where a guitar solo actually detracts from the overall feel or appeal of a song. None come to mind specifically. We listened to a bunch of songs. Oh, Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin. We listened to that solo. And that was no instrumental backing for at least the first 20 seconds of it or so. That was incredibly sloppy. It's Jimmy Page being sloppy, which is still somewhat technically proficient.
I couldn't do it.
I think that that's maybe a case where that solo, iconic though it may be, might actually detract from the overall song. That's literally space that didn't need to be filled, because otherwise, without the guitar solo over it, it would just be silence. And then you just cobble the two halves of the song together and cut that silence out.
And then yeah, and that's really what we're doing here, right? We're you say we're giving the vocalist a break. You say I said that we're meandering off and coming back to the song. I don't think either of those two things are wrong. Really, what I think you're doing is just, it's if you have a standard song structure, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, you've already heard the chorus twice. By the time you get to the third one, you might need a little time in there before you really can appreciate it. Otherwise, you're going to be like, we just heard this, I've heard it twice. You could have stopped there. So I think that really it's just breaking up that space so that you kind of forget a little bit that you just heard that twice. So now you can hear it with fresh ears, and it's not as annoying as it would be otherwise. So without a solo, I think it serves a purpose. It's very necessary in a song. But that I think is why.
It's necessary to have one, but it's not necessary to have a great one. Is that what you're saying?
They're all the same.
Wow, you heard it here first, folks.
There's bad solos, but for the most part, it's just again, it's a puzzle piece. You're throwing it in. Again, I'm all about lyrics, so that's for the most part. As we found out, like when we were listening to the Coheed song, I was like, "Oh, I never really listened to these lyrics. I didn't care, I guess."
Yeah, and then you finally came around to the realization that they were garbage.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, comparatively,
Sure,
message of toxic masculinity.
a song about a heroin uh, drug cook.
Well, I mean, Kid Charlemagne is a classic, and for a reason. In fact, now in 2020, it's probably just as timely as it was 50 odd years ago when it was recorded and released. It's just now the drug of choice is OxyContin instead of heroin or whatever he was cooking back then. We listened to, this is off the topic of guitar solos, we listened to Nose on the Grindstone. Tyler Childers?
Yep.
Is that the artist's name? Excellent tune.
Yeah.
He's a real cowboy of his art. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of them pills.
That was an excellent song.
Drugs are always going to be a problem. Maybe we should give that one a tune score.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Dude, how would you rate if you took the solos from each song and you stacked them up against each other? Who wore it best? First to last.
Okay, so out of the 3 songs that we listened to,
yeah,
for the purpose of talking about guitar solos, I would say the song that would suffer the most from extracting the guitar solos would probably be Kid Charlemagne. And I'm thinking because that's a big part of the appeal to me, I still would rate it very highly on composition. I don't consider guitar solos necessarily a part of the rhythm, harmony, melody. Sometimes I'll count it as part of the melody if it's, something like Seven Nation Army, like that kind of a melody that's repeated. Yeah, I think Kid Charlemagne would probably suffer the most because of the appeal for me on that song. I thought Welcome Home by Coheed and Cambria was so bad that it wouldn't matter if you took the guitar solos out. It might actually improve it a little bit because if it didn't have guitar solos, you wouldn't have made me listen to it for this episode, which would have been nice.
What about, okay, and the third one?
And for November Rain, that song is so richly produced. Otherwise, if you removed only Slash's guitar solos, it still has so much going on with the orchestra or symphony, whatever that, all them fellas playing the different instruments. It still has so much going on and going in its favor. And it'd be about 3 minutes shorter. So down to a trim, 41 minutes would be a lot better. I think it would lose a lot of the feel of that song because Slash's guitar there just, it sings. I heard you mention that that's your description. It sings. I would say it cries. Certainly the third solo. Usually you would.
The one thing I did love is the and it's just the mood of the piece. It changes throughout, has that dip in the middle, but the 2 solos preceding, not only are they different from the third one, and the third one has a much more dark, sad, crying feel to it. But the first 2 actually, I mean, it goes from happy to happier and then crashes down with that third solo. I think it largely benefits the piece, and I think those were all really good choices. I think that November Rain would suffer the most by taking away the solos.
Yeah, that's a tough call, and we don't have examples of those songs without the solos in them, or do
cool.
we?
That'd be cool if we did.
Now, I think our difference here is more to the fact that when I started playing guitar, or what appealed to me the most about the guitar and made me want to start learning how to play it was guitar solos, was lead guitar. I'm guessing that's not the case for you
I think it
because
was.
you're more of a lyric guy anyway. Why did you pick up a guitar in the first place? That sounded more accusatory than what. Why did you pick up a guitar? I didn't mean it like that, Kev.
No, I think I would agree with you. Actually, I think that when I was younger, I was more into that than I am now, and I don't know why. But for whatever reason, my moods changed. Um, I think I just really started to fall in love. My influences kind of changed, and I started to fall away from whatever I was listening to before into something that I felt was more, um, I don't know, introspective, and there was a lot of um, attention paid towards the lyrics and telling a story. And maybe I don't know why, but I'm just drawn to that stuff. And so that guitar solos for me feel like, well, I used to really like these shows, but now I've moved on to a different mentality. I have no idea what I'm saying right now.
If you're trying to convince me and or the audience that you've matured, Kevin, you've done a poor job. No, I think that makes sense, and I've certainly moved away from some of my early influences. You know, I still love a little bit of Led Zeppelin sometimes, and I would even say that the best song with guitar solo that heavily features guitar solos from the last 50 years, at least that I know of, is probably Achilles' Last Stand by Led Zeppelin. Just excellent solos. And it's a 10.5 minute long song. So there's a lot of space to fill.
Yeah.
So you'd appreciate that, Kev.
I only like long songs when I make you listen to them.
Yeah. Well, I've got a few long songs up my sleeve too. So keep in mind. I can come back at you on that one. So I think, we listened to a number of different songs, just listening to guitar solos before coming on for this episode. But we did give TuneScores to the three songs Kid Charlemagne, November Rain, and Welcome Home that we mentioned.
Yeah.
Go check them out. Let's go ahead and share just the TuneScores that we granted them, Kev. And maybe, if you're interested in the justification, we can probably post that in the blog on soundappraiser.com coming up. But I'll tell you just the overall tune score for me on Kid Charlemagne was 8.5 out of 10. For November Rain, it was 7.9 out of 10. And Welcome Home by Coheed and Cambria garnered a cool 5.5 out of 10. Kev, what were your scores on those?
That's so harsh. My scores were pretty close until that last one. So Kid Charlemagne for me, it hit me not as strong as the other ones. So 7.7 out of 10 for that one. Guns N' Roses November Rain ended up with an 8.7 overall. And then Coheed and Cambria with Welcome Home ended up with an 8.9. I think that last one is the one where we differ the most.
Yeah, I would say that's a wide chasm to breach. And on that disappointment, I think it's time to end this episode. But I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in. Kevin, thank you for talking about guitar solos, even though you really don't care for them or think they're important. I'm sorry, folks. That's been Kevin Niebrick. I've been Cary Nightingale. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one.